Not being able to find a transaction in bank reconciliation is a query that we regularly support our customers with. As long as the transaction is being entered and you know the transaction number, then it should be easy to determine why. To appear in the bank reconciliation window, a transaction must meet certain criteria, and rather than just talk about it, let's have a look at how you would check a transaction in the software. To start with, open the transactions window and then find the transaction that isn't appearing in the bank reconciliation window. So we're going to pick on transaction 14 on the list. The first thing to check is that it's a bank transaction. So in the type column, is it a bank transaction? So in this case, it's a BP, bank payment. So that is a transaction that is posted against a bank account. The next step is to check which bank account it's been posted to. Now, depending on the transaction type, the bank code will either appear in the account column or the nominal column. So with it being a BP transaction, a bank payment, the bank account number appears in the account column, but the transaction below that, it's a payment on account. So you'll see in the account column, we've got the customer account reference. The bank code, or the bank nominal code, appears in the nominal column. So you just need to check that either in the account column or the nominal column, depending on the transaction type, that you've got the right bank account code in there. The third step is to check the transaction date. When you open the reconciliation, you'll be prompted to enter a statement date, and this date acts as a filter, and only transactions dated on or prior to this appear in the reconciliation screen. So in this case, in the date column, that's the transaction date there. So 18th of September 2014 in this example. So is that on or prior to the date that we're reconciling up to? The last check in this screen is the transaction's bank reconciliation status. So in the bank column, what symbol does it have in there? Now it will actually have one of three options in there. A dash would indicate that a transaction doesn't need to be reconciled. For example, this would appear against, say, a sales invoice. An N indicates that the transaction is not reconciled, and an R indicates that the transaction has been reconciled. Now the bank reconciliation window only includes transactions that aren't reconciled. So the transaction must have an N in the bank column. So that's the main checks, and it's normally one of these that catches people out. So just to confirm, it's a transaction type. Is it posted to the correct bank account? Is it dated on or before the statement end date that you're reconciling up to? And finally, has the transaction already been reconciled? The final point to mention is that the transaction could be grouped with other transactions. For example, if you enter a batch of bank payments, they're posted to the same bank account, have the same date and reference, then when you post the transactions, they'll be grouped together. It's the group transaction that appears in the reconciliation window, not the individual items. If you need to show the transactions individually, then you need to delete the group transaction and re-enter the items individually so that they don't group.